Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Welcome to another video tutorial. The topic for today is changing fractions to a percent. So, you know the drill. Get out your pencil, get out your composition book. Let's take some notes. So the very first thing, let's just review what we covered in our last video tutorial. What is a percent? Yeah. It's a ratio of comparing something out of 100. 100. So when you say 70% off, that means 70 out of 100. It's a ratio comparing a value out of 100. Percents. What are percents? So what we're going to just talk about today is how to change percents to fractions, or vice versa. How to change a fraction to a percent. That's what we're going to talk about. How to change a fraction to a percent. And there's three ways that we could do this. And so go ahead and write down these three ways. Press pause if you like to, or you can do it after. But there's three ways. So number one, it says, if out of 100, just read it, then write it. That's pretty easy. Just read it and write it. What do you mean? Well, look, this says 700s. And percents are always out of 100. So if it says 700s, you write 7%. It's that simple. Because it's already out of 100. Once it's out of 100, you write it as a percent. Okay. This one, though, step two, sometimes it's not out of 100. The fraction's not out of 100. So then you just write it as an equivalent fraction out of 100. Well, what do you mean? Well, you know 7 out of 20, you know 20 can go into 100 5 times. So you could change this 7/20ths to out of 100. And your question is just 7 out of 20 equals what out of 100? That's your question. It's like an equivalent fraction or so. And so you know that, well, I can multiply 20 by 5 times. So I'll multiply 7 by 5 to find the equivalent value. So 7 out of 20 just means 35 out of 100. And again, once we have it out of 100, we now have a percent. That's right. So 7 out of 20 just equals 35%. So some fractions, you just read it and then write it. That's all you do. Read it and then write it, if it's out of 100. Some fractions, well, it might not be out of 100, but you can convert it to an equivalent fraction out of 100. So 7 out of 20, we can convert to hundreds. We multiply by 5, we multiply by 5. But then there's some fractions, like 7/8, where, well, 100's not divisible by 8. So we could solve this a couple different ways. I'll show you one way, which is just to divide. Because remember, this fraction is a division problem. This fraction says 7 divided by 8. So you could just go, oh, well, let me just divide 8 into 7, because that's 7 divided by 8. I can add my decimal, bring it up, and I can add a 0. And then I just start dividing. 8 goes into 70, 8 times. This is 64, my remainder is 6. Add a 0, bring it down. 8 goes into 67 times. This is 56. And then add another 0. My remainder is 4. Add another 0, bring it down. And I get 0.875. Now that seems a little complicated, but remember, that means 875 out of 1,000. That's what that means. What are percents? What are percents? They're out of 100. So your question is this: 875 out of 1,000 equals what out of 100? Well, all we're doing, we're dividing by 10 here, right? Because we divided by 10, okay? And you know the jump around method. When you divide by 10, you do what? You jump 1 to the left. So divide by 10 here. You're going to divide by 10 here and move the decimal 1 to the left. And so you get 87.5. And now it's out of 100. So you get 87.5%. So there's three ways that you can change a fraction to a percent. One, just read it, then write it. That's if it already is out of 100. Two, well, you can find the equivalent fraction out of 100. If the fraction's denominator can go into 100 evenly, well, then you can just find its equivalent value. So 7 out of 20 equals what out of 100? 35 out of 100. And then the last way is, well, you can do division. You can always divide the denominator into the numerator and change that to a decimal, which then you can change to a percent. Here, we change it to 0.875, which means that's 875 out of 1,000. And what did I do? I divided by 10 to get it to out of 100. So I divided 87.5 by 10, or 875 by 10, which is 87.5. So that's really the end of the video tutorial. All I want you to do is change each one of these fractions to a percent. Just change each one of these to a percent. I think I have one more thing. And then I have this question. We're going to go over this, but it's about Aaron Rodgers. And this is actually true for this season, or it was true up until yesterday's game. But anyway, he has a 66% pass completion rate so far this season. If he has thrown the ball 180 times, how many completions does he have approximately? So try to figure this one out, and we'll discuss this in class. I hope you enjoyed today's video tutorial, and I will see you tomorrow.